Here. Hi everyone, it's Carolyn Brown here. I'm bringing you the reworked presentation of what we actually did last Wednesday. What I found when I downloaded it was that my internet connection was quite slow and the words didn't actually match the slides, so it would have been an extremely frustrating experience all around to try and watch it. What I'm going to cover with you is the big data research that I've uncovered and other job search research from LinkedIn. I'm going to show you what that actually says and what that actually means for you when you're applying for your next job. Now, the big data research is tracking of over 16 million applications in one instance from a company called JobVite. Now, JobVite are applicant tracking providers or software providers. So if you apply for a job, whether that's online or you get referred or you're an internal applicant, most large corporates use these systems to track and manage your application. So, and they use a lot of the research to refine the different channels that they're looking to find staff. So all of the information that I'm bringing you today comes from research. It's not fluffy. I haven't made it up. It's not speculation. It's research. And the numbers are in, and the numbers are really revealing in terms of what's actually effective in you looking for your next job. So I hope you enjoy it. I've got a slight cold, so if you bear with me with that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. We'll be here for about 40 to 45 minutes. In the presentation, I'm going to show you some of the case studies from my clients that have done the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, and then I'm going to talk you through what we go through in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge because I've had a lot of questions about it. So I'm going to open up the vault, so to speak, and explain how it could actually work. And perhaps that might be something that you would like to join us on. We're actually starting that on next Wednesday. So still have a couple of spots left to fill. Love to see you come on board. I've designed it because traditionally I have been a resume writer and a LinkedIn profile writer, and I've done some coaching, but I wanted a really more satisfying way of working with people where I support people through that process of looking for a job, but also support people in doing something that most people find really hard, which is actually creating opportunities for yourself through networking. I want to see my clients succeed. So I've developed this step-by-step process that actually sets you up for success and gives you the right amount of support and the right amount of encouragement to get there. So just to give you a bit of background about who I am, you may well know me from my blog. You might be listening to this because you're a subscriber to my blog and you get some irregular emails from me about various things. But where I'm coming from is that I'm a former HR and recruitment consultant and manager. I've worked for the public sector, I've worked for the private sector, I've worked for SMEs, I've recruited for my own clients. So a lot of my insights come from that perspective. I've been using LinkedIn since about 2006. I'm one of the most connected Australian career professionals on LinkedIn. I'm an open networker. A lot of my clients come from LinkedIn. I train people on how to use LinkedIn. I've even trained recruiters on how to use LinkedIn and build up their own professional brand as well. I've helped thousands of people, and people that have worked with me have helped thousands of people find satisfying jobs. And I'm really proud to say that I'm the founder of one of Australia's most popular career blogs. The blog is something that has been the centrepiece of my work. I really love sharing the ideas that work for people and give you some tips and some pointers and let you know of things that I'm developing along the way so you can have input into them as well. So the blog is one of my absolute pride and joys. So that's a little bit about me, in case you don't know me. But here's where some of my clients recently have landed interviews. So anywhere from the ABC to Treasury Wines to Deloitte to Macquarie to HP, in not-for-profits, government, large and small organisations. So I've helped people land some pretty exciting roles. My clients tend to be senior to or mid-tier to senior professionals, and I broadly categorise them as white collar. So not your plumbers, not your brickies, but your project managers, your product managers, your IT managers, your CIOs, your CFOs, financial controllers, that type of thing. So professional people that want to create something of meaning in their lives through their careers. So people tend to come to me when they really want to make that next move, and they need help getting there. So they want careers that are absolutely meaningful to them. Excuse me. Okay. Warning ahead, I do quite bad slides. So I'm not a visual person. I'm a verbal communicator and a written communicator. So I apologise in advance for some of the visuals on these slides, but I'm using them really to enhance the message that I'm, to enhance what I'm saying, not so much to create a great visual representation of what I actually do. So, and I'm giving you that warning because here's the very first bad, dodgy image that I have, but I actually really like this image because it expresses why people come to me. And I know you're probably listening to this and you're here because you're experiencing some level of frustration with your job search. And this picture sums it up. You either feel like biting your keyboard or tossing your computer out the window. Now, the reason it's frustrating is that most people don't like job search, looking for a job. It's not something you do every day. It's a skill in itself. But compounding or behind that frustration is where you're actually coming from when you're looking for a job. So most people act out of a point of pain. So it could be that your company's restructuring. It could be that you're new to this market. It could be that you have lost your job. It could be that you're not, opportunities don't exist for where you are, that you've hit a ceiling. It could be that you're not a good fit or you don't feel like you belong in the place that you're working. So most people, when they're looking for a job, aren't coming from, I'm reaching out to something better and, simply love where I am now. I'm reaching out to something better. They're coming from a point where, you may not even realize it, but your confidence is quite low. And from that base, you're then stepping out into a market where you have to sell yourself. So you have to put a spin on the way that you're feeling. You have to uncover what you're really proud of achieving. You have to think about what you actually liked and actually sell that to a future employer. Quite often, you don't do development in your job around who you are as a person and where you'd like to go and what your strengths are and what your values are. A lot of the training that you might do on the job might be around you being a better performer in the role that you're doing. So often when I work with clients, they've come from that, I have to make a move for some reason, but I'm not sure what it is I want to do or what it is that I could present, because I haven't spent that time outside my work actually reflecting on who I am as a person and trying to match my choice of jobs around that. So what you'll find happen is that your job search tends to be directed by what you can see being advertised as something that you could do versus being like your job search being directed by something like a more holistic or more reflective version or understanding of who you are. So you can actually cut yourself off from a lot of opportunities if you're just relying on applying for a job online and going after what you can get versus actually what might be fully available to you. So let's move on to the next slide. I would suggest that most of you are listening to this because you're here to find out how to improve your chances of finding a role. When you don't hear back, it can be demoralizing. And what tends to happen is that a lot of my clients give up looking. or they get quite dispirited and quite cynical that, nobody's going to call them back, or they get quite they take it personally and think it must be about them, that they must be on a blacklist somewhere. So coming from a position where your confidence is knocked around to actually applying for a job online, not getting many callbacks, you can start to wonder about whether your resume has actually disappeared down a black hole somewhere. So with my presentation, I hope to be able to open the curtains on what's going on behind the scenes and actually give you a better direction to follow. I'm not saying stop applying for jobs. You don't want to cut off your nose despite your face. If you're looking for a job, certainly if you see something that you get a good feeling about and that it's a great match for who you are and your skills, apply for it. But I would strongly suggest that you look at the research that I'm going to present to you and think about how, what proportion of your time you're going to focus on applying online versus doing some of the things that I'm going to suggest to you, which will help you step forward in a far more educated, a far more empowered way, and you'll start to see a lot more ideas and opportunities opening up for yourself. So, the mission of the Straight to Shortlist Challenge is to get 5 meetings in 5 weeks with 5 employers. We do a very step-by-step process, starting from you making yourself the star of the show and thinking about what you can offer, the value that you can offer, what makes you tick, working on your LinkedIn profile, working up a list of people you'd like to target and mapping your network in that area, creating ways to get in front of them, and then some practice with what you're going to actually say when you get in front of people. Okay, so let's just move on to the next. I've got a little pop-up thing here that I'm just going to get rid of. So here's what the numbers actually say. And I have to admit, when I saw this, when I was digging into the numbers, I was actually quite surprised about how ineffective applying for a job online is. So this is big data research done by JobVite. They publish research, I think they've done it for the last 4 or 5 years, on the millions of applications that go through their systems, from somebody applying for a job to accepting an offer. And what they've discovered is, that if you apply for a job on a job board or a career site, your chances of being successful are less than 1%. So less than 1 in 100 people will be successful in a round of recruitment, basically. So I don't think many people realise that. But when I saw that and I reflected back on my time as a recruiter and in discussions that I've had about the number of applications people actually get when when they're recruiting, it actually makes sense. So going through a round of recruitment, roughly 100 applications, 1 person will get the job. So you're actually competing against a lot of people doing the same thing. So they get, almost 90% of applications come that way, but a very small proportion of those applications are actually successful. Similar research from a company called Lever, who do the same thing as JobVite, big data applications, 4 million applications going through their systems. This is 2016 research, showed that companies actually hire almost 1 in 16 referred candidates, compared to 1 in 152 replying to an advertisement. So that is pretty clear about which is the most successful way to actually apply for a job. So if you get recommended or referred to a job, you're absolutely maximising your chances of being successful in that application. Because I think it's like, that word of mouth advertising. It's like you might search for a bunch of people or a bunch of businesses online, but if your friend says, well, I've actually used this and that's the easiest way and I trust this particular provider, you're more likely to check them out and take your friend or the person you know's word for that. And it's the same in hiring. And if you think about it, what you are is a piece of paper being compared to 100 other bits of paper. And it's very hard to actually jump off the page and be a real person. So I think that's one of the reasons that sort of explains the success rate of finding a way to be recommended or referred. And that's it, really. Recruiters sometimes get overwhelmed by the sheer volume and you just get brain overload. I mean, we as human beings find it very difficult to process, I think, more than 3 or 4 bits of information at the one time. Recruiters get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of applications. And I put this slide together to show why the traditional way, of recruiting via like a career site or the Seeks or the Indeeds of this world actually don't work effectively. And basically, I think because people can apply for a job, it's very easy to flick your resume off to various places without even thinking about the job. And I know I used to get hundreds of applications from people that I wondered whether they'd actually even read the advertisement. So recruiters are creating a rod for their own back in terms of, because it's so easy, that means you get hundreds. But then on the inside as well, you do see that a lot of job advertisements are very badly written and with very generic sounding terms about what you'll actually be doing. And I often find with my clients, one of the questions that I get them to ask to research jobs is a really simple question, if they can actually get to speak to a recruiter, is to ask, what am I actually doing every day? Paint me a picture of a typical day or a typical week in this job. And that actually shows so much more about what you'll actually be doing than listing a bunch of skills and reading off, a bunch of skills and a bunch of accountabilities, because you're not really thinking about how you're actually applying those things or, what part of the job you'll actually be using those skills in, basically. So one of the reasons that the success rate of people applying for jobs is actually low is because job advertisements aren't particularly well written. You'll also find that because recruiters get overwhelmed and because not a lot of people apply a level of science behind hiring, that people can shortlist on quite bizarre reasons. And I think shortlisting an application on one typo is one of those bizarre reasons, because you might be applying for a software engineer role and have a typo on your application. Doesn't mean that you're not a great software engineer. But you do find that things that like typos, recruiters will eliminate you on, basically because of the volume. Quite often, and this sort of reflects in the types of job advertisements you see, there are many people involved in the hiring process, but actually there's only one expert in that. And so you might have the line manager writing an advertisement, but then the recruitment team get a hold of it and change it, and it doesn't actually reflect the job that you're applying for. Often jobs get advertised that are already filled, meaning that recruiters are still receiving applications that they never get back to. Jobs get filled internally, and often recruitment teams are understaffed and undervalued and probably quite distant from the job that they're hiring as well. So what this means for you is that this becomes you if you're applying for a job. This is what you're seeing at the other end of all of that, is that, excuse me, you're applying for a job that you really don't understand because you haven't told me too much about it. I actually can't reach anyone to tell me more about it. but I really am the perfect person for this job. And that's how it ends up. So, there's all of the things going on behind the scenes, and you're trying to match yourself up to something that's a reflection of that. And I don't know how many times you've seen it, but it's pretty frequent to see at the bottom of an advertisement, "Don't call us, we'll call you." Only shortlisted applications will be contacted. So you don't get feedback on whether you're actually suitable for that role, or why you've been rejected. So you can't ask questions of the job, because those insightful questions, because nobody's actually going to return your call. And that's been another major frustration of this process for people. Basically, you with all good intentions, you put a call through to the recruiter, and you never hear back from them. And that's one of the reasons that I mentioned before that I put together the Straight to Shortlist challenge, is that despite the best of intentions, I'm sure people who put their names at the bottom of those advertisements do want to get back to people, but it's extremely hard to get a hold of people to then put in a decent application that really presents a compelling way, or a compelling reason to hire you. So if we look at those numbers visually, I think this sort of spells it out for people. Big data says that being recommended for a role is a smarter way to find a job, and you can see that the green is the effectiveness of the type of application, and the orange is the proportion. So being referred is far more effective. You're actually competing against fewer and fewer people. The number that you should really remember is 10 times. So getting referred or recommended for a job actually increases your chances of success by 10 times. And again, that's the reason that I set up the Straight to Shortlist process, because I want people to succeed. So another interesting finding, just going back to that power of being recommended or referred. This is a research that was actually done of 1,600 internal recruiters by JobVite. 34% of internal recruiters trust referrals versus 7% trusting hires from outside recruiters. So it's a really, that recommendation from somebody is a really trusted source and contributes to that high success rate. So the big question I hear is who can actually help you get referred or recommended for a job? So this is really interesting, and this is something that I knew to be true, but when I read the LinkedIn research, I had one of those aha moments. It's not necessarily people in your immediate circle who are more likely to help you get recommended or referred into a job. It's people that they know. So LinkedIn's research said that your second or your third degree connections are far more likely to be the source of a lead for your next job compared to people that you immediately know. And a lot of people do tend to make the mistake of being very over-selective, I say, with how they connect with people on LinkedIn. But with LinkedIn, a bigger network has its advantages. And I say to people, go for a really strong core network of first degree connections, because you don't know who they know. And so you'd be, being referred to a job or recommended for a job or recommended to meet someone in that second degree tier. So yeah, they're the people that are more likely to be the people that are going to refer you to a job. And when you think about it, it's very logical, because they've got access to different ideas, different opportunities, different people, completely different insights from the people that you might normally spend the most time with. And going back to, how do I start, do I have a network who's likely to help me? What I found is that people underestimate the size of their immediate network, the size of people that might be able to connect you up with other people. And typically, there's a research done by some PhD students at Columbia University on actual network size and estimating the network size of individuals. They found that typically people have a network, the median figure is 472 people. So that's probably a lot more than you actually think. And it's very useful, I think, to think of yourself already at the center of a network rather than, that's something that you actually have to go out and build up cold. They found that the average network size is 611 people. So you are at the center of a network. It's about how you view that network and how you might actually have those conversations that help you get a referral into a company or referral or a meeting with somebody that might be useful to your job search. So I often get the question of well, where do I even start? And remember I mentioned basically that a lot of people start with what's advertised to guide their choice of next job. But I would suggest that the starting point is you. So not so much external, but internal as your compass. So the best way to make strong connections and attract the right opportunities is start with knowing you and what you want. The reason that I mention that is that JobVite research shows that LinkedIn, and so you knowing you and what you want and putting that up on and conveying that in a really compelling way on your LinkedIn profile is actually going to help you attract attentions from recruiters because you sound like a person, not a job description. And also more people are going to say yes to you because they understand you as a person than if you don't do that self-reflection and research on yourself. And psychological research says that, and it's one of those sort of findings that just confirm what seems to be common sense. But I think a lot of people actually forget this, that if you do something that matches your strengths, matches your values, you actually enjoy what you're doing, so you're playing to your strengths, but you're actually more likely to be successful, you're more likely to be promoted, and you tend to earn more money. So stepping out of a situation that's uncomfortable for you where you're looking for a job, it's actually a good point to start to do some of that reflection because that will set you up with a compass around what it is that you should be targeting, but also, and you can use that as a screener for advertisements. So it sets you up for a compass around what sorts of jobs you should be targeting, but it also, I believe, and I've seen this time and time again in clients when we go through that process, it sets you up with a point of confidence. So, a job search, you do get knockbacks, and going back to, what's the value that I've delivered and I've enjoyed delivering, it helps you maintain some momentum and maintain some confidence. Because fundamentally, that's what getting a good job is about. It's about a match between what you can offer and what the employer offers as well. But I think that gets lost in the way people look for jobs. So these are the questions that I start with and that we start with on the Straight to Shortlist program. Basically thinking about, what do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? What skills can you contribute to your future employer? And what results can you deliver? I set people up through the Straight to Shortlist program with what I call value propositions. And here's an example of Shriddha, who is on my website. We recorded a video. Now, Shriddha absolutely embraced the process and found a job. what he said was most useful for him was the compass for him. So the value propositions that we came up with. So we basically made it really clear on his LinkedIn profile from asking those questions and came up with, well, first of all, what he enjoys. Ask me what I could do all day and the answer comes easily. I enjoy working on highly complex processes and issues requiring in-depth knowledge across multiple technical areas and business segments. I love detailed analysis. We teased out what his strengths were. Key strengths include keeping up to date with technology, training team members and documentation, how that adds value. These enable me to help customers boost productivity, mitigate risk, prevent system outages, which lead to reduced operational costs. And then his value propositions are redefining or optimizing processes to improve customer satisfaction and team productivity, identifying automation and mitigating risks, to save significant cost to the customers, delivering difficult projects on time within budget. So these sorts of things are his value propositions. Now, what Should have found was going through that exercise, putting them up on his LinkedIn profile in a very clear way. When people went, or recruiters went back, or other people went back to look at his profile, it was really clear that he was, his resume matched, for example, but also when he reached out to connect with people, that was really clear. And when he went out and networked with people, it was, for him, he knew the types of organisations he wanted to work for, and he was really clear about the value that he could offer. So it's not so much based on, this profile is not so much based on what he did in one job description, but a reflection back over the past 5 to 10 years of his experience, drawing out those things from his jobs. So it actually widened. It actually increased his confidence when he was actually going out and speaking with people. And he said that was the thing that made the big difference for him. So the next part of the Straight to Shortlist challenge and this approach that I suggest people take is to think about, well, where could you apply these skills? So thinking about organisations where you've thrived, where you haven't thrived, but in particular, thinking about what organisations have similar problems to the problems that you've solved, because that helps you map out different types of organisations that you could actually work in. And what people have found is actually that's been much wider, that list of organisations, than they thought of originally. Also, these sorts of questions actually help you narrow down your focus of jobs that, or narrow down the types of jobs that you might actually apply for as well. Now, the question about where have you thrived and where haven't you thrived? The reason I ask where haven't you thrived is often you'll find things that have caused you the most frustration or anger are things that you care most deeply about. So what you haven't enjoyed can actually be quite a strong pointer to what you really value. So that sort of reflection helps you. It might be the difference between you working for a large established corporate versus being fantastic in a more entrepreneurial or startup type environment. So some people like structure and some people don't. Some people like the security of, something like the public sector, and other people like the idea that, they could actually be a key part in startup phase. So those questions are really, really important. And then in the Straight to Shortlist challenge, but also this is something that you could do, is I call it play the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon LinkedIn game. So if you've got a list of organisations that you're interested in, look on LinkedIn to see who you might be able to connect in with. So who do you know that could introduce you? who could provide you with information, or who's just simply really well connected in your sector and might know about people and jobs. And, thinking about the size of your network being larger than you think, the research has proven, and my own experience has proven, that often people are far more willing to help you than you actually expect. That's actually helped people reach out to other people with more confidence, because you get a real boost when somebody that you're interested in actually says yes to a meeting. And actually going out and meeting with people directly can answer a lot of questions that you might have about the types of jobs that you should apply for, versus applying for a job and just not hearing anything back. One of the people that I work with on the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, Diana, she went out. Her role was traditionally defined as a project manager, but in a more agile environment, people have been redefining that role to be a product manager. She thought that was something that she could possibly apply for herself, but didn't know whether there was any really big differences between being a product manager or a project manager. So we actually organised for her to meet some people in product management roles in the ABC and SBS, and from that we worked out that she could call herself a product manager, and that the types of training that she might do that would add to her skill set and add to her employability. But actually what she found was that she was being referred to a couple of roles before they actually got advertised. So one of the people at SBS started to talk to her about a similar role, and then another person that was, I can't remember the name of the person that she met in a startup company, actually sent her information along to a recruiter, and they contacted her. So that process of who could provide you information, or reaching out to people that are professional peers, you get a lot better, greater insight into whether that could be a great career choice for yourself. And the process that we tend to use in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge is what we call informational interviews, where you're reaching out to people that could provide you information about a sector or about a job or about what they do, or give you a career advice. And quite often from that process of being curious and being, proactive and taking the first step, and genuinely interested, quite often those discussions do lead to what is it that you're looking for. Let me see how I can help you, because you're building that initial relationship that people start to know, like, and trust you, basically. So you're no longer a piece of paper that's landing on their desk. So if I was to sum that up, for all of the points that I've shown you, what does this mean for your job search? Well, I'd say you're not setting yourself up well for much if you're relying on just applying to advertised jobs, for all of the reasons that I've mentioned. It can be very disempowering and dispiriting. You can lose your confidence pretty quickly. You can lose your insight very quickly. You don't get great feedback on where you should focus. You're narrowing your opportunities to what you see versus a more wholehearted exploration of what's actually out there. And that's why I start with you, not what is advertised. Your LinkedIn profile becomes a really powerful tool, and a more powerful tool than your resume, because that's where your network is. That's where the people are that might refer you into a job. You're more connected than you realise, so get your profile in order and start to build those connections. And there are a lot of jobs out there, and sometimes those jobs are an idea in someone's head or a business problem that's coming up that's occurring, or somebody knows that somebody is about to resign, or that there's a restructure. There's a lot of things going on in organisations that, are in their formative stage that actually haven't been advertised. So those sorts of jobs, when you're going out and doing that process of informational interviewing, you're putting yourself much closer to those jobs than you think. So in terms of me being a numbers nerd, and it's, give me the facts type nerd in terms of your job search, I can't actually find, I've never been able to find the data or the research that was done that says that 80% of jobs are not advertised. Everybody quotes that, but I can't see that. I've never been able to find that. And I've looked at census data, recruiter data, all sorts of things. But the big data research says that finding a way to be recommended is far more effective, and I know it to be a confidence-boosting exercise. It's 10 times more effective. So I would be, if I was out there in the marketplace right now, I would be certainly applying for advertised jobs, but a big chunk of my time would be networking, doing informational interviews, finding ways to get recommended and to get into the know, and finding ways to be recommended, or referred into a job. Because, as I mentioned before, this is so typical of what you'll see, and this is ironically a career transition specialist role for Chandler McLeod, and at the bottom of it, it says, unfortunately, we're not able to answer any queries prior to you applying. So tell us all about yourself and sell yourself into this job, but we're not going to tell you anything. So it's like being interviewed by people with a bunch of poker faces, basically. So with the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, here's how we get you in front of your top employers. I mentioned it's basically a 5-step process, and I will go through each of those steps one by one. The first stage is making you the star of the show. So we set you up with a compass, what you've contributed in previous roles, what you've enjoyed doing, and what your strengths are. And we turn that into, well, how's that going to guide your job search? And as I mentioned, Shooter found that immensely useful. The second part is we actually use that information and turn your LinkedIn profile from being a job description into you as a human being that people can relate and connect to. So when you reach out to people, you'll find more people say yes. And also you'll start to get on the radar of recruiters who's searching LinkedIn. As I mentioned, 87% of recruiters are background people, but it's become the go-to source of people. So the profile that we set up makes it very clear about who you are as a person, the value that you can offer people, and why people should connect with you. That part of the process I was working on recently with a client of mine called Kim Han Tan. Now, Kim Han, we actually started working together on the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, but 2 weeks into us working together, developing his compass, developing his LinkedIn profile, he actually found a job. So absolutely delighted that he did it. Now, basically, I spoke to him about what he found valuable about how we worked together. He actually found his job through contacting a friend of a friend on Facebook. And now he's got a contract in Adelaide. Kim Han came from Singapore. He's a senior project manager in oil and gas, very experienced, but no network in Australia. In fact, I think he had about 65 connections on LinkedIn, but I think almost very few when we actually started. So he actually hadn't even been actively building up his network until we got his profile in order. So we made it really clear on his LinkedIn profile about the value that he could bring. So track record of working, achieving on-time delivery for 95% plus of projects valued between 5 to 70 million, where deadlines are being cut back. the value I bring includes driving cost efficiencies in global supply chains, troubleshooting and rescuing complex projects to restore client confidence, robust risk management and forward planning to ensure projects meet and exceed KPIs, reducing cost of non-conformance by improving quality, and so on. So what he said was that the people that referred him to the job went and looked at his LinkedIn profile. The company that offered him the job looked at his LinkedIn profile, and it was very clear to them about who he was. But actually going through that process of identifying the value that he could offer and his value propositions boosted his confidence in the interview. And the process that we went through with, okay, who are your target organisations, actually widened that in his mind the types of organisations he could actually apply his skills to. So he didn't just refer to him as his last position. He looked at his career as a whole person and thought about, well, I think he came up with 3 or 4 groups of types of companies he could actually apply his skills to. So that the first stage of that Straight to Shortlist challenge actually set him up really well for securing that job by referral. And off he is in Adelaide. So go and check out his profile as an example. Okay, so then just going back to the Straight to Shortlist challenge and the steps, naming your target employers. So we do a brainstorm. In this part of the process, I put myself in your shoes too and think about, well, if I was personally in your situation at your stage of your career or stepping into the market, how would I start to build up my network? And so I kickstart people off with a list here, and then we start to basically build that out. And we look to see how, for those companies, how we could find somebody working within those companies that could actually introduce us, or sometimes we basically go cold, but design some emails that actually get a lot of people say yes to those. So we map the network, see who you might know. If we don't actually know, we think about, well, what would make this person say yes to a meeting? And that's basically the creating compelling communication. So we either do informational interviews, which sometimes turn into leads or job offers or passing your resume along. Sometimes we just go, okay, let's go direct. If it's a more senior role, it might be more appropriate to go to the CEO or the C-suite. But then we come up with 3 reasons or three value propositions or 3 reasons that they should meet. And we look at, what challenges that organisation is going through and how that person might assist them in meeting those challenges. So that's the communication part of that. It's a lot of fun doing that because it's quite a creative process, and it's always a great joy when somebody says yes. And I'm constantly surprised by just how generous some people can be. And then we do what we call Let's Execute, which is basically putting this all into play. We also do some practice with informational interviews, so a structure for each of those interviews, and some role plays that helps you get set up. And so that's stage 5. And so that's why I say it's a 5-week challenge. So basically what I say to people is that I have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you do the work and demonstrate that you're coachable and you're completely engaged in this process and you don't get 5 meetings, you get your money back. So I back what I do. I put my skin in the game in this as well. and work just as hard as you do to get you those 5 meetings and get you set up. So I think it's a rock solid guarantee, and I wouldn't, I'm absolutely backing myself with this process that to make it work for you. So the next challenge starts on June the 5th. I have 2 places left now, not 3. And if you're interested in applying or interested in taking part in this challenge, sorry, I'm flicking between screens, send me an email to Carolyn@InterviewIQ. You'll see the link to the Straight to Shortlist program on my website with more information, and we can basically pick it up from there. And thank you very much for listening to this, and I hope to speak to you soon.